Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general.
The Handmaid's Tale is a show about America all gone taken over by weird crazy religious types after a massive right-wing extremist coup takes over the whole country. Episode 7, The Other Side, tells a bunch of the story from literally the other side, in a bunch of different ways, because this time round it's the story of Luke from his point of view. And starting way back with the day that him and June decided to escape from Boston, and they met up with a guy called Whitford, who's no family friend who's going to try and sneak them across the border to Canada after making them ditch all of their non-essentials. And after a pretty uncomfy drive in the boot of the car, and an inspection from a friendly cop,
all good? Nothing in here?
They get back to their snowy escape house where they hang out and wait on Whitford coming back with Canadian passports. Until one day while they're out skipping stones on a frozen lake, a Canadian guy out hunting with his dog bumps into them, and that freaks them out and they start deciding to pack to leave, only for him to show up on the door while they're checking out where the gun works. But it turns out it's okay because he's actually friendly and warns them to get going now, because it turns out Whitford got caught and he was hanged in the town square, and now baddies are out to find them. So they head off and, well, we know how that goes because we've seen it before. But what we don't know is that once June and the kid run off, Luke tries to fend off the eyes with his pistol, and he ends up getting shot but not killed. And then his ambulance ends up skidding on ice and goes over a bridge, killing the crew, but he escapes and makes it to an abandoned town where he passes out. And he wakes up when he's being kicked by some folk, and they've taken his gun, and it turns out that they think he's an eye because of the coat he nicked. But they realise pretty fast that he's actually not, he's on the run. They scoop him up into their Scooby bus, and they patch him up, like his bullet wound in the back of it, and introduce themselves. And they're a pretty motley crew, but it turns out one of them's a mute escapee from an early handmaid school. And Luke still wants to head back again, but instead, the leader of the group takes him to this church, and he sees a whole load of hung dead people, and he decides to regroup and heal in Canada before going back. But then the boatman doesn't want to take him, but luckily, he's still got meds from the ambulance, and he pawns off his wedding ring to the guy, and he's like, okay, that's fine. But then it's not, because the bad guys have found them and they start raining hot lead down on them, and most of them end up dying. But Luke and wee Squeaky Pip get away. And we cut to 3 years later, when he's been called in to speak to the mayor or the governor about something, and he's quite surprised because she gives him a letter from June, and it says, I love you, save Hannah. Oh. So what did I think? Well, this episode was a really interesting change from last time. I mean, not only a departure from the commander's house in the middle of Gilead and all that stuff and June's story, but also in the fact that this was a pretty dialogue-free adventure that kind of reminded me an awful lot of the film The Road, which is that post-apocalyptic one where most of it is just Viggo Mortensen wandering around with his son. But I also liked that Luke isn't like any kind of superhuman, he's just an everyman. I mean, we kind of knew that, he was a bit of a sort of, your average guy, sort of probably works in an office and, isn't exactly a superhero. And he can't load a gun well under pressure after a car crash, and he gets his ass booted in a shootout with professionals in about 2 seconds, and he's basically injured for the entire rest of the episode. And I've got to admit that O.T. Fagbenley, whose performance in this episode is absolutely brilliant, totally surprised me, because I didn't think that much of him in previous ones. And it turns out he's actually a British-Nigerian actor who used to be in shows like Casualty and Hollyoaks and The Bill and stuff, which won't mean much to people outside of the UK, but I mean, basically it means he's grown up as a jobbing kind of London actor. And if he continues to be this good in the show, then I'll be hoping that he's actually in more episodes rather than fewer. And it was the great wee things in this, like little moments that, I don't know if they were just on-set accidents or they were actor or director choices, but things like how he dribbled a little bit of spit in the ambulance, or how he was in pain still climbing over the fence, or just even sort of the way he was cry-laughing in that extreme close-up. I totally believed it. And I didn't really take to him in the first few episodes, as I said, but I think now I'm getting really on side with his character. And it's great that we're getting to know a bit more about the world. And that's something I appreciate, since I remember not liking in the book how it just showed you Gilead and was really vague about how it all came to pass, which always came off as a bit lazy and unreal to me. A bit like how if you watch Demolition Man, you wonder, how does this hippy-dippy weird place, with no crime and everyone being nice to each other and never touching each other, stack up to the rest of the world? I mean, yeah, I'm totally keeping it highbrow here, that's me. But at least in this we get a sense of what the world outside Gilead is like. We're actually starting to learn about stuff. Stuff like how there's a little America in Canada as a sort of refugee and immigrant colony for Americans who've escaped the regime, and also how things are different in Mexico and how they have real problems. And if the show is going to make more of what happens in Little America, that could be really good. And I suspect they might, since they've kept Luke and Squeaky Pip together for 3 years, and why wouldn't you unless you were going to do something with those characters? And I also like how there was more than a few wee bits in this that felt like homages to other movies and stuff. I mean, as I said, definitely there was a feel of the road in some parts of this, like him tooting about in the snow, or how the house that they ended up escaping to really reminded me of the house that Walter White hides out in near the end of Breaking Bad. And like the whole bit about the coat, I mean, that was really felt like a homage to the Holocaust movie The Pianist, which totally makes sense. I mean, thematically, that was also a great scene in a really powerful film. I mean, you should check it out, it's a really good film. But obviously, there's also that whole Children of Men vibe to all of this, and I really feel like the show has definitely taken that in. Because, I mean, why wouldn't you? It was one of the best films of the year when it came out. It's still a fantastic movie that definitely, if you haven't checked it out, it's brilliant. Watch it. But, I mean, as always, there's a few things that I didn't quite like as much in this episode. I mean, aside from the normal complaint, which is that it's too dark, which, wasn't always too bad, and the jumbled up timeline, which I put it chronologically in the recap because it is a little bit confusing because at times you aren't sure where you were, like when he was on the bus with the Scooby Gang, because it was so dark. But also that entire scene in the church, I mean, apart from the fact it totally reminded me of that scene from The Sixth Sense where he sees the bodies hanging, and that kind of pulled me out of the moment, it felt really rushed and choppy. Like, I don't know if there was meant to be more here and they've edited it down, but even if not, it was a bit like, hey shot guy, why not come wander with me for an unspecified distance, which I'm sure won't bother your life-threatening injury? And he's just like, yeah, okay. And then, oh, look, let's just walk up all these stairs. And oh, look, there's some dead folk, because, oh, you've fallen over. I mean, that won't hurt your bullet wound. And look at them more, because, I don't know, the audience need to see it, because the scene is so fast done, and it's so flimsy and pointless. I mean, I got what they were trying to do with it, but it just totally, it was so choppy. And also the guy Whitford, why did he make them ditch all their stuff? I mean, he's like, no, don't bring that, because if you have a backpack, they'll know you're running away. And then he chucks all that stuff away. But then he makes them lie and hide in, the boot of the car, or sorry, the trunk of the car. And there's plenty of space for a backpack in there. I mean, there was no reason for them to throw that stuff away at that point. Because, I mean, what happened? If they're going to go on the run, it wouldn't matter anyway. And if, something like that happened, so why worry about it at all? I mean, they were in the car boot. It's not like they'd look more guilty if they had a backpack. Like, the cop's going to be like, they're opening the boot and he's be like, oh, right, you're just hanging out there. Okay, now that's fine. People do this all the time. People just hide in boots of cars for fun. Wait a minute. A backpack? You're escapees. So yeah, I mean, that whole scene, I don't know, it just made no sense to me. But as you might be able to tell, I'm pretty much having to scratch at this show kind of hard to find much wrong with it, because it's really pretty good. And that's a great sign. I mean, this far, the second half of Season 1 is shaping up to be fantastic. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions. And as always, great big love and thanks to my top tier patrons, Judith Coloma and Michelle Forbes. Your support helps me out massively. Thank you so much, as always. And thank you everybody who's watching the show. Please, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and the wee bell thing like everyone always says. And upvotes to the video always help. Everybody stay safe and stay well. Hope you all have a fantastic week. Bye now.